Starry night, sun will shine bright. I'll be holding you every time.
Belly flop.
There you go. No more driving. Yep. Get on the chip bar.
There you go. One more.
Yes. The chopping we do though is very derived. It's a lot more or contrived. A lot more contrived. It's a lot more orchestrated than what you'd find logging. I mean, nobody took this much time to set things up. Nobody had that much money invested in an axe. But what it is it's fun, and it takes a lot of practice, and it is something that you can race.
Logging sports is taking old concepts from the history of logging and competing using kind of axes, chainsaws, saws, water events, climbing poles, just kind of like the roots of like traditional forestry, I guess is where it's based on. That's what I'd say.
Some of the events we do, climbing, choker setting, things like that, a lot of those are just straight out of logging. If you can climb here, you can climb on a logging site. It's the exact same equipment, it's the exact same trees. It's not that different.
Logging sports is a bunch of people that get together and have fun and do a bunch of stuff that keeps us in shape for our off season. I don't know, it's fun and competitive, but it's really just a good time to get together with people.
There you go. That's the line you want. There you go.
30 seconds.
Break it, Xander. Break it, Xander. Better angle, Xander. Better angle.
It's a way to release stress, builds muscle, and it's just like when I go and I talk to people like, oh yeah, what do you do in college? Oh, I'm part of this club, I'm part of this. Okay, well I do logging sports, and I get to explain to them what I get to do and all the different fun events that we get to practice. So.
Well, the history and tradition of logging sports is very funny, because what happens is these guys got together who are working out in the forest, either topping trees or milling and lathing, and what they did was they took the wood, they got it ready, and they sent it down. There's always scraps left over. Friday afternoon, the lumberjacks would be out in the forest, they got paid, and what do you do with paid? You see if you can bet against somebody else, and they compete against one another out in the middle of the forest to see who is the best lumberjack of all. We just happened to turn it into a sport.
Felling of trees has been critical to the survival of many civilizations. The efficiency and technicality has greatly increased since the first tree was felled to the ground. Before there were chainsaws and mechanical fallers, lumberjacks would chop away at the trunk of the trees, continuously until they fell. In order to easily transport the timber, the trees would then be chopped into sections. This required the finest precision and strength in order to not waste wood, and to secure the health of the chopper. Hand felling by axe worked fine for trees with manageable trunks, but once logging moved to the American West, it would never be the same. The grand forests of the West were incredibly different than in the East. The western forests held trees that were sometimes over 20 feet thick, standing well over 300 feet tall. The western forest forced loggers to change tactics and create new methods for logging. To overcome the huge swelling at the base, lumberjacks would climb up above the swelling using axes and springboards. Once above the swell, loggers would stand on the 1-inch thick boards and swing away at the tree to create the sloping cut and start the horizontal cut. They would then grab their cross-cut saws and saw the back cut until the giants toppled to the ground. Usage of the cross-cut saw revolutionized logging. When loggers first began to use saws, they would continuously get stuck in the wood fibers and sawdust. The sawyers would have to remove the saw and sawdust, then continue their work. This was very inefficient. Over a relatively short period of time, the crosscut saw was redesigned to remove the sawdust with each pull, which effectively allowed lumberjacks to continuously saw through the trunks of the trees without stopping. Lumberjacks were able to efficiently saw through huge diameter trees, with less effort than ever before. The enormous trees would then be sawed into sections for transport. The loggers would limb and buck the trees into sections known as logs. Bucking required brute strength and forethought. The endurance of buckers was phenomenal. Felling and bucking a tree could easily take 2 men a whole week of long, exhausting days to complete. Getting logs to the mill in a timely fashion could make or break logging operations. The abundance of rivers made it possible for loggers to speedily get logs downstream to the mill. Men would guide logs downriver to ensure that nothing blocked the logs. If a log did get stuck, it could take many men to make the logs mobile once again. These men were notoriously known as river hogs. As technology advanced, so did efficiency of logging. The steam engine gave loggers the ability to move loads of logs at greater rates. Steam donkeys were attached to high-lead cables to pull logs out of the felling sites to the landings. This was especially useful in remote and hard-to-reach areas, because oftentimes there were no rivers or ways for animals to haul the logs away. A spar tree was essential to cable logging. A man would have to climb 50 to 100 feet up the trunk of a sturdy tree, carefully remove the rest of the tree, and then rig cables to the tree. These cables would then be used to pull logs from the forest to the landings. High riggers were admired by the loggers. It was a mixture of admiration and relief that the job wasn't theirs. The job required an incredible combination of courage, strength, and skill. The success of an operation laid on the riggers' shoulders. Logging operations would later evolve to what they are now, with the revolutionary chainsaw. The mass production of the chainsaw allowed loggers to supply the necessary lumber that the 20th century demanded. Logging has always been one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. In the past, workplace deaths happened so often that it was normal for fallers to move their deceased friends out of the way of the operation until the workday was finished. After the workday was over, they would then proceed to trek out of the forest and inform the police. Due to the remoteness of most logging operations, loggers lived in camps near their work sites. With long hours and difficult work, entertainment was crucial. Many events seen in modern logging sports were born from logging camps and operations. Loggers threw axes, among other things, as a sort of entertainment. Loggers would compete in events for winnings on days which they were not operating. Over time, the events held in the competitions became the subculture known as logging sports.
Let's go! Use your body, Carl! Let's go! Come on, Carl!
I don't know. The saws, the axes.
Carl, finish it! Go! Burn it up, buddy! Let's go! Finish that shit! Let's go! Come on! Breathe! Let's go! There you go. Finish strong, finish strong. Oh, I'm dead.
Slowly and slowly, I'm getting better at bucking. The better you are at something, the more fun it is.
There you go. There you go.
That was too much. Haven't done it in 2 months and then do it 3 times in a day. It takes a lot more talent and a lot more practice than it looks like it does. Really precise, especially when you start talking to the pros. The tips and the precision they're at, I mean, it's really something when you watch a pro, to watch how precise and accurate they really are.
Definitely. It's a very, wood chopping is a very technical sport. There's some people that have a knack for it and can pick it up quickly, but in a lot of cases you need to be dedicated to it to really be able to compete on the upper level. During the winter months, I try and train in the gym 3 to 4 days a week. As it gets closer to spring, as we get closer to some of these events, I will try and integrate more chopping and sawing. I'm a person who learns depends very much on repetition to ingrain what I'm doing, so that when you get up to that block in that competition, when the pressure's on, you want to have that technique and that event ingrained in you, so that you don't have to think, it just comes naturally.
Timer's ready. Contestants ready. 3, 2, 1, go!
Why do you do logging sports?
Logging sports because there's something medieval about smashing an axe into something, and that's the total truth. I don't do it because I think it's. I do it straight because it's fun to have an axe and smash it into wood, smash it into stuff. 100%. That's it. It's just fun to have an axe and throw it, and chop it. I know it's fun to just do something like outside of school and whatever else. Just go in the woods and hang out and just like. It's just fun to play with axes. That's pretty much it.
I'm into logging sports because my hometown of Westwood always had the Paul Bunyan Festival every 4th of July. They do a bunch of logging sports and it was the coolest thing. It happened all year in town. And I got the opportunity to do it and I'm taking full advantage of it.
I want to know how you got into logging sports, coming from LA.
Well, I didn't really know what forestry or logging sports was when I was in high school or when I grew up. But when I was a freshman at Berkeley, there's this thing called Calapalooza where like all the student organizations advertise. And kind of my mindset was like, you know, I'm in college, I'm at a great school, and I really want to do something while I'm here that I wouldn't ever have the chance to do otherwise. And so I like went to all the booths, and then there was the Cal Logging Sports team flyer, and I think it was Allison and Ariel. And they gave me a flyer, told me about the team, and I came to a few practices, and I've been doing it for 2 years now, and I'll probably do it for all my years here at Cal.
For myself, it's important because a lot of the skills that I learned in logging sports are really applicable to my job. For instance, I'm doing firefighting this summer, and I got hired with the expectation of I'm going to be running crosscut saws on my job, I'm going to be using axes on my job. A lot of the other stuff like axe throw is really just for fun, but a lot of the stuff is really practical for people that are involved in the forestry industry.
More than a job application, this is I take this club as something to keep people in college, because I probably would have quit a long time ago if it hadn't have been for the people I've met here. It makes it a lot more fun.
Hey, man. Every time the axe hits the block.
Logging sports is helping Americans remember how important wood is to us in our daily lives, and helps us appreciate all the people, the men and women that bring that wood to us in all of its different forms, various types of papers to structural materials for housing and in all the buildings that we have, to all the different types of products. Those products are brought to us by lumberjacks, by loggers, by foresters who help decide how to properly manage the forest, and then employing loggers to help bring those materials, those wood supplies to us. The tradition of logging sports helps us see that history, helps us keep that tradition alive.
I like that it brings people back to that. It does. And it makes people realize how much work it was. I mean, we're doing this because we want to. We're not doing this because we have to. If we were doing it because we have to, it'd be a lot less fun. But, I mean, it brings people back to a lot of the ways that things used to be done. And actually, a lot of these kids are learning how to use crosscut saws. Nobody knows how to build or maintain a crosscut saw anymore. So the fact that we get to learn that here is really unique knowledge.
And it's important, right?
It's important. It could be. I mean, who knows? But it's something that's going to be hard to come by here pretty quick. All the people that used to use a lot of the tools that we use for fun, they're getting old and dropping off, and so it's good to see that there are other people out there that are willing to learn this.